We're going to get started in just a moment, everyone. Okay, here we go. Good evening, everyone. I'm Joel Whitney from Brooklyn Public Library's BPL Presents. It's a pleasure to welcome you tonight to this discussion of the importance of seeds. Together over the last 2 seasons, writes Hudson Valley Farm Hub's Kay Green in an essay for the exhibition anthology Lenape Center is publishing with BPL, we have grown 1 corn variety and 3 bean varieties. The corn we are growing is Sapsing flint corn, which you can get a proper pronunciation of shortly, with 6 to 8 inch ears and telltale 8 rows per cob. This blue-black corn is striking. As with many Lenape varieties, this corn traveled with Lenape people through their fractured and forced diasporas as their communities were violently pushed from their Lenape-Hoking homelands, further and further west by settlers. Varieties that survived with their people often were renamed based on place. In this case, the corn came to be called Oklahoma Delaware blue corn. Traditionally, this corn is ground into cornmeal and used to make flour for baking or cornmeal mush. These particular seeds, Kay continues, were brought west to Oklahoma with the Lenape people in the hands of Sarah Wilson Thompson, who then passed them to Nora Thompson Dean. Dean was instrumental in the preservation, development, and survival of traditional Lenape culture through teaching the language, ceremony, crafts, and healing plant medicines of her heritage, as well as caring for traditional seeds. It's very much in the spirit of Nora and Sarah that we convene tonight. When you consider the seeds that you can see at Greenpoint and again at Hudson Valley Farm Hub Seed Rematriation Program, you are seeing a byproduct of that forced journey west and the resilience of the Lenape people who saved those seeds, recovered them, brought them back, in this case to Brooklyn, which is part of the Lenape homeland too. Before I introduce our speakers who represent a beautiful partnership, I want to let you know that on April 28th, 2 Thursdays from now, artist Sam Van Aken will discuss with Joe Baker the return of Lenape fruit trees, weather permitting. This will actually happen at Greenpoint Branch, where Joe and Kay and Diami are tonight. Lenape Center's Curtis Zuniga will also discuss with Elizabeth Neves plant medicine, and that one's by Zoom in 1 week, 1 Thursday from now. All of this is part of this one-of-a-kind and long overdue exhibit that has been going on since late January that Joe Baker has curated with his colleagues at Lenape Center and with the BPL as the sort of stage. Tonight, we're hoping to listen in on the conversation between these 3, whom I'll introduce soon. But I wanted to bring in my wonderful colleague, Acacia Thompson, who can talk to you a little bit about the importance of this branch in the Brooklyn Public Library's fold.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Acacia Thompson, and I'm the Environmental Justice Coordinator here at the Greenpoint Library and Environmental Education Center. Greenpoint Library sits on Lenape-Hoking, and I thought I'd just speak briefly about where we are. We sit atop the 3rd largest oil spill in American history, and it is interesting that we get to bring back the artifacts and the people from the Lenape to this space. This space has been treated so poorly for the last 150 years. And something that everybody should know about the Greenpoint Library and Environmental Education Center is that the community fought and won a large settlement against ExxonMobil, and that is why we partly have this Environmental Education Center. BPL partnered with community stakeholders to create this wonderful library so that we may work together, learn more about the environment together, fight together, and also have interesting conversations about Indigenous people and erasures and things like that, that we are beyond thrilled to have had the opportunity to be the host of this wonderful exhibit. And we hope to that you all can come down and see it, and are also able to come in person to see the rest of our events. Thank you.
So much, Acacia. So without any further ado, I just want to introduce Joe Baker, an artist, educator, curator, and activist who has been working in the field of Native arts for the past 30 years. He is an enrolled member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians of Oklahoma and co-founding executive director of Lenape Center in Manhattan. Baker is an adjunct professor at Columbia University's School of Social Work in New York and was recently visiting professor of museum studies at Colorado College, Colorado Springs, Colorado. He serves as a board member for the Endangered Language Fund, Yale University, and on the advisory committee for the National Public Art Consortium, New York, and cultural advisor for the new CBS series Ghosts. Baker has guided in his capacity as executive director for Lenape Center partnerships with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where his work is currently on display, Brooklyn Museum of Art, American Ballet Theater, Moulin Rouge on Broadway, the Whitney Museum of Art, and others. In partnership with Farm Hub, which we'll be discussing tonight in the Hudson River Valley, Baker and Lenape Center are championing the return of ancestral seeds in the homeland through a seed rematriation project. This seed-saving project, now in its second year, has done much to contribute to the cultural foodways of the Lenape diaspora. In partnership with the Brooklyn Public Library, of course, Baker is the curator of this first ever Lenape exhibition of cultural arts in the city of New York, which opened in January of 2022. Baker graduated from the University of Tulsa with a BFA degree in design and MFA in painting and drawing, and completed postgraduate study at Harvard University Graduate School of Education MDP program. Kay Green is a seed being. His seed journey began 20 years ago with starting the first seed library and a public library in the country. 4 years later, Kay and his partner Doug Muller turned the library into the Hudson Valley Seed Co. From there, Kay, Rowan White, and the Hudson Valley Farm Hub partnered to begin seed rematriation work with the Mohawk community in Akwesasne and more recently, the Lenape Center. Along with continuing these cultural seed relationships, Kay is developing a non-binary approach to botany, as well as creating a seed shed map of the Hudson Valley region. Kay continues to provide trainings to new seed libraries, teach seed saving skills, and enjoys meeting new plants every season. And finally, Dayami Soloviev is a mother, farmer, lifelong local to the Roundout Valley and cultural regeneration visionary. She brings her passion for land, seed, and lineage stewardship to her work as the seed rematriation garden coordinator at the Hudson Valley Farm Hub. When she's not at work, she can be found in her log-grown shiitake yard, tending her home garden or sailing with her family on the Mahanikatuk or Hudson River. Her work in the seed rematriation garden brings together the threads of healing, lineage, and deep connection to place. Please welcome our three speakers.
Nula Lintum, Ilipayak, Lakaman, Walaskanak, Wemi Weltik Kekuk, Tanananekik. Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Baker, co-founder and executive director of Lenape Center, and it's my pleasure to welcome you, our viewers, and the Brooklyn family, Brooklyn Library family, to this discussion tonight with my esteemed colleagues, Kay and Dayami. And tonight we're going to be sharing with you what I feel is this incredibly beautiful and spirited partnership and collaboration that has allowed us to both hone our skills, our farming skills, and our knowledge of traditional seed keeping from a Lenape perspective, and to begin to repair and return the ancestral seeds to the homeland. So let's begin the conversation. You know, there's so many aspects to talk about, the technical aspects of farming itself. What is seed saving? This to me has been an educational journey. I've spent most of my life in museum practice and the arts, and I'm thoroughly informed and aware of the fact that cultural material is collected and held not only in museum collections, but in private collections. And I've learned through this process that the same phenomenon happens also to seeds. They are removed from communities and held in private collections away from their communities. And so, Kay, I was hoping you could sort of give us some more information about this phenomenon, because I think it's fascinating.
It's really interesting to look at the broader history of seeds. You know, seeds and humans have co-evolved over 10,000 years. So for more of seed history, seeds have been held within community. They've been passed hand to hand. And so along with the seed and the variety changing over time and the genetic story held within the seed, there's cultural memory within the seed. A lot more is passed from hand to hand with the seed than just, you know, what the seed is going to grow or produce in terms of food or sustenance. In the last 150 years, we've seen a massive change in the way that seeds are shared. And that's mostly due to the commercialization of seed and the separation of seed from community. So, you know, just in the United States alone, we've seen a consolidation of seed resources by fewer and fewer commercial industry, to the point now where, you know, 80% of the commercial seed resources on the planet are controlled by 3 biotech and pharmaceutical corporations. But it didn't happen by accident. I think that over time, once seeds became commercialized or seen as a commodity that could be profited from, there was a very active and purposeful separation of seeds from community, this global seed collecting by commercial enterprises and by individuals in private collections as well. And so there's a lot of cases where the seeds were separated from their people, from their stories, from the meaning of what is a seed. And that definition continues to change depending on how we look at seeds. I think that in my journey with seeds, it really came from thinking about the story first, and the relationships around the seeds first. And it's really been like a big responsibility and an honor to work with Indigenous communities who are growing towards seed sovereignty, and to be able to be a small part of that process and support that process for the communities.
And Kay and Dayami, what's it like on the ground? What's the process here through the work at the ground level?
So I'll just start by saying seed saving is different than food growing. For people who've never thought about it before, someone has to grow the seeds that are then planted in order to grow food. And I think, you know, seed production or seed saving is like an invisible part of that process, that even when we talk about food security and we talk about, you know, local food, people aren't thinking about the seed piece of that, the seed growing piece of that. So the season looks very different. The processes look very different. The way that we care for the plants and care for the seeds is different. And Dyami is on the ground quite a bit with the seeds. So Dyami, do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, and I definitely do. And I'm wondering, Joe, if you might set the stage a little bit for talking about the seeds to give a little more context for the return of these seeds to their ancestral soil, and how they might have been separated from the Lenape people to begin with.
Right. Well, you know, for me, the seeds hold the DNA. They hold the stories of our people. They hold the stories of our journey. They hold the story of our survival, and they become key components to the foodways and lifeways of our culture and people. We were separated intentionally and purposefully from those foodways through the genocide of what happened here in the ancestral homeland. These were not accidental happenings. How are people separated from their culture? They are separated with very intentional acts, like livestock turned loose in the agricultural fields of a community, like the numerous massacres and genocide in both human and environmental genocide that happened here in the homeland to forcibly create the dire conditions of a community, a culture being forcibly removed from that homeland. So on a personal level and in a very spiritual and spirited way, the return of the seeds are primary because they represent the opportunity for Lenape presence and culture to continue and to repair what has been lost and separated over hundreds of years of diasporic movement as we were pushed further and further west. So to me, these are very powerful symbols. And to me also, they are art forms because they echo the life process and the cycles of birth and maturity and rest, which are that echoes our own personal lifeways. So they become primary and they're critical to our continuance of our culture. And that's why it's such a joy to be able to work with both of you and the extended family at Farm Hub to really help us go into the fields and create the conditions that will bring the seeds home in a very joyful and celebratory way. And you are key to that, Tayami. You're on the ground with those seeds, those seed babies. You make it happen. So how do you make that happen?
So it was 2020 that we planted Lenape seeds with Joe and the Lenape Center's support for the first time with this partnership. Is that right, Kay? 2020?
Yeah.
And we started with a very small handful of seeds. Like Joel said, one corn variety, the Sasapsing corn, and 3 bean varieties. The purple King Sessing bean, the Hannah Freeman bean, and the blue Shakamaxon bean are the 3 bean varieties. And so the first year, our corn plot was very small. We started with 120 plants. And that's one of the amazing things about seeds is if they're tended and the weather cooperates and all goes well, at the end of the season, the harvest yields more seeds than we started with. And so the following year, we were able to plant a larger plot, about 100 by 100. And that yielded about 50 pounds of seed. So this year we're planning to plant at Hudson Valley Farm Hub about an acre of the Lenape Sasapsing corn. So similar with the beans, we're not doing as broad scale planting, but similarly, we started with a very small amount, and each year there's more. And what is additionally being yielded, which is very exciting, is food for our harvest ceremony at the end of the year. We were able to sit down in the field with Joe and other folks from the Lenape Center and folks from the Hudson Valley Farm Hub and share in a gorgeous feast prepared by my husband, actually. And kind of experience the seeds as food as well as seeding the future plantings.
And Ayami, when you speak of that increase in volume each year with each planting, you're really speaking about one of the Lenape traditional values, and that is of generosity, and that Mother Earth is very grand and generous, and Mother Earth provides all that we need if she is respected and cared for, and if we approach our plants with respect and prayer and song, then the production is generous and great. And it's part of the life lesson that the seeds can teach us. And it's part of what this country and this society is so much in need of today. We need to return to these traditional laws and rules of living that really support this generosity. And you know, we know that Lenapehoking, the original homeland, was a virtual paradise. It provided everything that was necessary for the vibrancy of our communities. And it is only through genocide and the colonial acts of white settlement that we became displaced. And now it's time. The time is right for the return, not just for our communities, the 5 federally recognized tribal communities of Lenape, the Delaware Tribe of Indians, the Delaware Nation, the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohegan Nation in Wisconsin, and the 2 communities in Canada. But for all people, we need this healing moment and celebration of traditional values. I see Kay, you're nodding your head. So do you agree?
I just have sometimes my heart gets in the way of my voice when I'm hearing you speak and when I think about what this work represents. The main thing I was thinking about while you were just sharing was somewhat what's been, for many people, forgotten about seeds, like seed amnesia. Seeds that have been passed down and where people are part of the lineage of the seed have continued this understanding that a seed is a living being. And what what capitalism has done and commercialization and commodification of seed has done is separated people's understanding of seeds as living beings. So when we think of seeds as a commodity, then it's just about profit. It's you manufacture it, or it's about technology, and that's what's led us to a place where seeds are patented. There's trait patents. There's genetic engineering. There's these ways of controlling life, and there's actually ways now of making seed saving illegal by individuals. But as soon as we come back to that place of looking at that seed and remembering that it's alive, this is a living being, it brings back that sense of mutual care, that seeds have always cared for us and we care for seeds. And that, having that relationship of mutual care it's part of culture. It's part of how we understand who we are in the world. And it's the way that we understand how to care for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for the earth. And it's really wonderful to be able to work with seeds that are still part of that lineage and still part of that memory. And then it's also part of our work to continue to ask what seeds have been separated from that, and what needs to happen to stitch this back together. And so I love thinking about the bandolier bags and the beading. and the relationship between the art that's in this exhibit and the seeds that are in the exhibit, which I think some people might come and be like, why are there both things happening here? You know, what's the relationship? Why were these choices made to have the seeds here and have the bandolier bags and the cape? And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to your choices around, you know, the curation of this exhibit and why you wanted that relationship to be present.
The purpose for the combination of the seeds in the same space, shared space of the exhibition with the beaded bandolier bags, as well as the turkey feather cape, was really about continuance. It was also about return. And, you know, there are historic bandolier bags on exhibit here as well as contemporary. Those bandolier bags had been separated from our home communities for over 100 years until approximately 1999, when the first contemporary bag was brought home to my community at the Dances in the Spring in Copan, Oklahoma. The turkey feather cape, in the same way, had been separated from our home communities for over 100 years until it was created specifically for this exhibition by tribal member Rebecca Half-Lowry, and just completed very recently, about Christmas time, 2021. It's the same with the seeds. They, having been separated from our home communities for hundreds of years, returned here to this exhibit in Brooklyn at the Greenpoint branch of the Brooklyn Public Library, January 2022. So for me as curator, it was an important element of the narrative, hopefully the narrative that would echo loud and clear through the curation of this exhibit, that these important items, this important art was very interconnected, interwoven into the fabric of our culture. And they're not to be separated. They're animate, they have life, they have presence, and they are alive. And also, when you tour the exhibit here, the bandolier bags and the turkey feather cape are accessible. They're not encased in vitrines. They're not separated from the viewer. It's the same for the bean tapestries. They exist within the space, the public space, the democratic and public space of the Brooklyn Library. And they're here to be free, to be experienced, and to speak to any of those visitors that share that space and time with them. I see my lights keep going off and on. And someone told me if I wave my hands, they would come on again, but that doesn't seem to be working. So I hope this is not terribly distracting. You know, we thought we would be outdoors on this beautiful terrace, and the thunder beings now are, you know, making noise outside. So we're all here in the virtual world of Zoom, and my lights come and go. So.
Kay, I was wondering if maybe you would speak a little bit to like the specific relationship of annual seeds and people and that cycle, and then maybe you and Joe both can talk a little bit about the finding of the seeds because they were separated from their people.
Yeah. So I was just, one of the things, Joe, when you were talking, I was thinking about the word that was coming up for me was sustenance. That the relation, like the bandolier bags and the art forms are, it's a form of cultural sustenance. And that the seeds and growing the seeds, which are also food in this case, is both physical sustenance and cultural sustenance. So there's a real relationship there. In terms of the, working with annuals. So annuals are seeds that you plant that go through their full life cycle in one season. Most of the foods that we eat when we sit down to our plates are annuals. And for food farmers, they're harvesting throughout the season, and they're often harvesting well before the seeds are actually mature. It's a very different way of thinking about regeneration, of thinking about life cycles, and of thinking about sustenance. So in the seed gardens, we're growing from seed to seed, the full circle in one season. And we're paying attention to the sustenance that plant needs and the care that plant needs in order to go through its full life cycle and produce really healthy seeds that can then be planted or that are healthy in terms of eating as well. So Diami, was that a little bit what you were thinking about with the life cycle?
Yeah.
So there's not much harvesting going on during the summer for us. A lot of it happens at the end of the season and in the fall. And the fall is a really just like joyful, I think of the fall as like a long dance. We're stomping beans, we're winnowing, we're setting up fans, the chaff is being separated from the seed. It's a very kind of choreographed and dance-like and rhythmic process when we're actually harvesting and bringing the seeds in and drying them and threshing them and winnowing them and getting them ready to be passed on. It's a very intimate process where our bodies and the seed bodies we're together in that dance.
As you speak, Kay, I'm reminded of the dance, the movement, the action of that harvest ceremony, and it's really a beautiful celebration of a period in time when the seeds come home to rest. But tell me, what are the conditions for seed saving? How are these seeds stored and protected after they've been harvested?
So, well, I will answer that in the context of what's happening at Farm Hub now. And I will say too, to like tie two of the things that Joe was speaking to before and something that Kay was just speaking to with seed saving, which is that, like further context for why this partnership emerged is that, because there is this relationship to time through the growing season that is necessary to see the seed from planting through harvest in order to save seed for the following year. The interruption of that relationship with place will make it so that seed saving isn't always possible, and it was interrupted, I think, probably many times in the forced removals of the Lenape people. And so over time, I think my understanding is that there were less of the seeds held in the community. And so at some point, I'll kick it back to you to say a little bit more about like the refinding of the seeds. But then after the harvest, then there's the caring for them in the sleeping time of the seeds, which today at Farm Hub, we basically they need to sleep for the winter, and they need a dry, dark, and humidity controlled environment, not too moist, and they basically need to sleep until it's time for them to germinate again. And so at the Hudson Valley Farm Hub, there is the facilities to take care of the seeds with Joe's support to do so. With, there basically we we work with the seeds in the off season as guided by our partners. So in this case, we've been holding the seeds for the following growing season and increasing the seed. There will be a point at which the seeds are going back to the Lenape community. Maybe you can speak to like the further vision of that stage of things as well, Joe.
Right. Well, that is, certainly our mission, to be able to have enough seeds that we can begin the process of returning the seeds to their home communities through a carefully planned trajectory of seasonal growth. But the notion, I don't know if people think much about the fact that seeds were often carried by people when they were threatened and displaced through violent acts from their community. We often hear of, if you're on the run, what can you take? What can you take quickly? What can you secure within your person? What can you take that will possibly help you survive to this unknown, distant place that you're being forced into? And seeds were carried by people. And I would offer that same phenomenon of seed carrying is happening today. And I think of the people in the Ukraine who are being forcibly removed from their communities and having to flee into distant communities. And I would imagine that seeds are being carried by some people because it's part of the human need to survive. Is what can I take? How can I feed myself, my family, and my community? And I have no time to think about this. I have to collect these seeds and flee. And so that was happening here in the homeland as our people, the Lenape, were forcibly removed to these distant lands in the West. And it wasn't just one removal. It wasn't one long continuous removal. There were 5 interruptions, cataclysmic interruptions, severance of our people from homelands, from communities, 5 forced removals over a period of many generations until my community finally arrived in Indian Territory in 1867, later becoming the state of Oklahoma. So I think it's remarkable that the ancestors have given us this powerful gift, the seeds, and it is through the care and love that they gave the seeds that we have the energy and the will to return those seeds to the homeland today. And we're able to do that through the generosity of Farm Hub and the people who allow us to work in the fields today in the ancestral land. It's really a magical moment.
Joe, as you were speaking, I had another sort of word bubbling up from inside, which is uprooting. And why do we call it uprooting when people are forced from their homes? And it's called uprooting because growing food, planting seeds is such an integral part of culture and of who we are, that we feel uprooted when people feel uprooted. But there is also a physical uprooting happening. And also, as you were both sharing about, why would you take seeds with you? I was thinking about past, present, and future. So seeds hold history and historical and cultural memory. there's also this very present moment of your skin pressed to the seed, and then your skin and the seed pressed to the soil. Like, there's not much more being present in the moment than that. And then thinking about the future, which is, what will this grow? How does this support community? How does this create healing? How does this help us care for each other? And then at the same time with that timeline, thinking about elders and children, and that when you're uprooted and you're violently forced to go somewhere else, you're going to take your elders, you're going to take your children with you. And the seeds are our elders, and the seeds are our children too. They are our family just as much as the human family. And so that, to me, that's another part of the impulse of take your seeds with you.
Yeah. Take your family, right? Your
Take your
community, your culture, your art, your life ways, your food ways. Yeah. Bring them. We got to go. That's it, right? Yeah. Joel, I see your face. Should we take questions?
Only when you're ready. I know that you've all called forth some more questions from each other, and if there's anything, Dayami, you want to observe, I know you've been calling forth questions from them, but from where you sit, Dayami, what has been the most satisfying part of this partnership?
Oh, I love answering that question. So I grew up just within a mile of the fields at Farm Hub, and so getting, Kay was talking about the skin to seed, and being able to be a steward of the relationship between Joe and his seeds and the soil of this place that I grew up in is incredibly satisfying, and something I feel so blessed to be able to be a part of.
Yeah. I know there are questions that are starting to trickle in, and I'll just come on to encourage more, please. More questions and comments. One comment was that this should be part of New York City school curricula, and I couldn't agree with that any more than I already do. But I also feel like Dayami was asking a little bit more about what was involved with going to the seed collectors, the individual private collectors, and sort of this process of getting them to share them to the degree that you're comfortable talking about that, Joe. I know some were obviously more generous than others, but I'm hearing you all speak, and I'm thinking of this in terms of, we're so obsessed, quite rightly, with biodiversity loss, species disappearing. And I'm hearing you and I'm thinking, like, these are like species and subspecies of plants that are coming back, that are part of a culture that knew them. And without that culture, they just sat in collections in many cases, including government collections. So can you talk a little bit about that history, Joe?
Well, yeah, sure. And we know, and as was mentioned in your opening comments, Joel, that the Lenape, the Delaware Lenape blue corn, which has been returned to ancestral soil, was actually carried through generations through the family of Nora Thompson Dean. And Nora Thompson Dean, of course, is the inspiration for the visionary for our work today at Lenape Center. And we always recognize that in any occasion, public occasion, that it is through her actions and her voice that we are allowed to speak today. She has inspired our work. But, growing up in Oklahoma, I wasn't aware that Nora held these seeds. And although I spent a lot of time in conversations with her, and upon her passing in 1984, she ensured that the seeds would be safeguarded by giving them to a government seed bank at the University of Iowa. And that is the knowledge that we had as we began the project with Farm Hub. So we knew in this case where to go to access those seeds. And in terms of some of the bean varieties, we didn't know where they were held. And we began to educate ourselves and learn that some of these seeds were held in commercial seed companies. So we actually contacted them to regain access to the ancestral seeds. So it's been a sort of a process of seek and find. And we do know currently that there are a couple of very extremely rare varieties of Lenape squash, which are held by one private collector in Pennsylvania, and we've been trying to access those seeds for the spring growing season, but we've not been successful in acquiring them at this time. So we're always on the lookout for access to our ancestral seeds. You know, they're not unlike museum collections. If we just were made aware recently of some of our Lenape cultural art that's held in the government collections in Stockholm. And so, you know, we're always in the process of having to re-find our family, re-find our community, and bring it home, bring it back together.
You're leading a Lenape renaissance, Joe, and it's beautiful to see. You know, other comments that are coming through are specifically about, you know, these 4 varieties, which I think you've spoken to, but please address, from Nancy, such a beautiful project, please address how climate change might affect this effort. Plant foods might not flourish in the same locations because conditions will be changing. Have you found that to be the case? It sounds like not an issue so far.
So, you know, we were talking about this a little bit before that. Part of the way that a lot of communities are separated from their seeds are they wind up being forcibly moved to parts of the country that don't have the same soils, the same climate cycles as what their seeds were used to. So that can be an issue. In terms of climate change, like we could do a whole 3 hours just on, you know, the effects of climate change on seed. But what I want to touch on for this is that seeds are resilient, seeds are adaptable. And so if we have close relationships with seeds and the ability to have access to land, the resources that we need to grow, and the ability to stay in one place and grow seeds season after season after season, that the opportunity for regionalization, for adaptation, and for resilience is already held within the seeds. But the relationship between people and the seeds is what really needs to be cared for in order for that resiliency to be expressed. And I'm specifically talking about like cultivated, domesticated varieties. It's a whole other conversation to talk about wild varieties.
And in terms of climate crises and environmental change, imagine if you will, if we could successfully reforest our original lands, if we could return land to its original state, what life that might support and what health it might bring to humanity if we could begin to return to an original respect and relationship with Mother Earth. If we could, and what we do know and what it has been given to all of us as a promise, if we care for and respect Mother Earth, we will be provided everything we need. We need to, again, return to that way of life, because currently our lifeways are threatened. And, we must act, and we must act quickly to secure. And as Kay said, that knowledge that the seeds, the trees are extremely resilient. They're very powerful and strong if they are cared for and respected and tended in a respectful way.
And I'll add that the 4 varieties of seeds that we've been tending at the Farm Hub are doing really well. And beans and corn are both plants that we've seen experience certain disease and pest pressures on that land in different situations. And these seeds have been doing amazingly well. All of the beans, like the vines are like bursting, like really healthy leaves, lots of flowers, a ton of seed, and the corn, I'm gonna knock on wood. It's the beginning of another growing cycle. But the corn has been doing really well as well, and productive. So that's good, despite all of the challenges that we're facing from climate change.
Beautiful. Agnes asks, are there specific ways that seeds were carried during the diasporas, during the forced removals? Some cultures are known to have braided them into hair or sewn into clothing and quilts. Is there a specific way for the Lenape that you remember reading about, or anything else, Joe?
No specific way that I'm aware of. They just, as noted before, they were cared for as family members, and they were carried in that way.
Mary has asked, are there expansion plans? For example, a connection with the NYC Parks Greenbelt Native Plant Center on Staten Island. I'll just jump in quickly to say that our fruit trees project, which is happening in 2 weeks, there are fruit trees at the branch now. And Joe can speak to how the fruit trees show a sophistication of cultivation and cultivating that is not part of the Eurocentric narrative of the Lenape people. But those trees, thanks to a partnership with the Prospect Park Alliance, are going to go from the rooftop in the interior of Greenpoint into the soil in Prospect Park in late April, in a couple of weeks. So we're excited about that. But tell me about other possible expansions, Joe and Kay and Diane.
Well, we were very excited and continue to be excited about the possibilities of indigenous Lenape orchards and the return here on the island of Manhattan. We know from the journals of the crew of Henry Hudson that notable orchards were sited on the shores of the Hudson River upon pre-contact, and that these were orchards of beach plum and the crabapple. These were cultivated orchards, which indicate a very sophisticated agricultural practice that's commonly not recognized or thought of when we think about pre-contact. So it's exciting for us to be able to showcase these indigenous fruit trees and to bring them here to the rooftop terrace, and later give them a more permanent home in the permanent ancestral lands of Lenapehoking at Prospect Park. I mean, wow, that's great. And the other thing I will say about the diaspora and this movement west, today I was in Central Park, and the park itself is an explosion of cherry trees. But today was a little different in that the redbud was in bloom. And that to me was the first sighting. And as mentioned before, I grew up in Oklahoma. And so the redbud was significant to our community and to our people. It actually is the state tree of the state of Oklahoma. But Oklahoma, that northeastern section, which is home to my community today, is the far western edge of the eastern forest. So our removal from the original homeland here, all the way west, we were never without sight of many of the important trees, the red cedar, the red bud, the sassafras, that were important to our culture. So through some act of great beauty, we had a continuous thread of contact, even though we were displaced. So to me, seeing the red buds bloom was significant. You know, what I knew as a child in Oklahoma growing up is that when those red buds bloom, it's for sure spring.
Well, I'm going to keep going, but Kay and Dami, please jump in if you want to add it to anything that Joe has been saying. Debbie says that just an observation about how this conversation ties into the Passover biblical story about Jewish ancestors leaving Egypt with unleavened bread and I'm sure seeds. Good.
Yeah, I mean, as Joe was speaking to before, the forced removal of people and the relationship to seeds is common amongst people. And as a Jew, familiar with that story, and yeah, thanks for bringing that one to the table. Would you add anything, Kay?
I saw kind of a related question in chat, which is about what else is happening that is, similar to this. So, at the Farm Hub, we have other relationships as well. The relationship that this seed rematriation work started with really came through Rowan White's work, Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, and the Indigenous Seed Keepers Network. And our first partnership was with the Mohawk community in Akwesasne. This year we are having a Jewish diaspora garden, which is a partnership with the Jewish Farmer Network. We're working with an organization called Soil and Soul. So we've worked with the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library. There's a lot going on. And what I think is important about these different types of relationships is that they're all different. And that sometimes I feel like people want to be like, what's the model? Like, let's reproduce one model of one relationship and one way of doing this work. And I think, what I've learned over the years is the importance of centering the leadership of the partnership within the home community, not with yourself or within your organization, which means that the relationships, the decision-making process, how seeds are cared for, what happens to the seeds, like that whole process, everything involved in that is informed by, is led by the home community, which means every relationship is different, and that there's no one way to go about this work. And that's everything from community seed libraries through cultural rematriation work. And so I would encourage folks, not to get stuck in the idea that there's one way that this work happens.
Well, it disappeared, but I'm back. Peggy asks, out of curiosity, what were some of the dishes made from the food harvest? Maybe this is a question for Dami first. Were they traditional dishes or something else entirely?
Sure.
Well,
So
let me
go, Joe.
let me say that it's important to remember that tradition is also forward. It's not just reflecting, it's forward thinking as well. So with that in mind, Ethan, Dayami's husband, had the challenge of taking the seeds and the corn and creating a feast. And that feast the feast was art itself. And so he brought to that his voice, his spirit. And Dayami, you can speak to that.
Sure. So we did follow some trails from some of the stories that had been passed along and ended up in seed catalogs where some of these seeds were commercially available, specifically about the uses of the beans. There was one bean that was traditional in bread. So there was, we ground the corn, and it was really beautiful to grind the corn because she just ground into a fine, smooth grind for making cornbread. So there was a blue cornbread with beans, whole beans in the bread.
And Dayami, that practice of beans, including beans in the cornbread, is still in practice, because last week when the Delaware Nation, a Moravian town, visited here at the library, the exhibition, we were talking about cornbread, and they said, "We include beans in our cornbread, do you?" And I said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, we do."
Yeah, awesome.
So it continues today.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that piece. That's awesome. So then we made a couple of stews. There was a venison stew and a vegan stew, and each of the stews featured different beans. And that was the meal, and it was beautifully set in the field in front of the garden. Joe had a vision from his childhood of a feast in the field, sit down meal, white tablecloths, and flowers, and it was a beautiful day.
And by the way, there's a video of it, I think, that we showed in Joe's opening exhibition opening. We played the full harvest video, if that's what I think it is, right? And so
Yes.
I just put the link of the spot we're going to collect all the videos from the panels that we've done through this exhibition through the end of this month. And some of them are missing, but will be added soon, but you will see Joe's exhibition opening video. And I think towards the end of that, we play this beautifully sort of no dialogue, but just sort of atmospheric video of folks eating the food from the harvest, and just the crosstalk, and kind of the camera is almost like a Robert Altman, just scene shot with no close-ups on any of the dialogue. It's beautiful. So I encourage you to look for all of the videos from past panels that you may have missed, including that one. In one of my local parks, writes Nancy Inwood, blackberries are being planted among other native plants after clearing out the invasives. And Rad notes that Onondaga Nation Seed Library is also amazing. And we're just running to the end of this, so I'm seeing if there's anything else. There's a question. I just read about the new ecological projects in Governor's Island, I think. Is there any extension, the current project of the open orchard? We talked about that a bit. And then there's more thank you. So on that note, if we didn't get your question, you could please email us. But Dayami, Kay, Joe, it's just wonderful to have your voices talking about this amazing project, which I don't know, it inspires me so much to hear about. And it's an honor to have you with us here at BPL. And thanks to everyone at the branch who've been doing the hard work of hosting this exhibition physically. Thank you to all of the volunteer Dawsons who've been there, 4 or 5 days a week, just sharing shifts, doing it on a volunteer basis to guard over these beautiful art objects that Joe has curated with us. and the bean tapestries in particular that Kay, Diami, and Joe are responsible for. So thanks to everyone for coming tonight. Kay, Diami, Joe, do you have any final thoughts as we close down?
Just to express my joy and for this project as it continues and expands, and the beautiful relationships that have come from it. It's really about kinship, and it's beautifully expressed, and I'm so grateful. So thank you, everyone. Wanishi, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Soon, and look for those upcoming events a week from today. Plant Medicine with Curtis Zuniga and Liz Neves, as well as a week after that, Sam Van Aken with Joe talking about the return of Lenape orchards and fruit trees to Lenape Hoking. Thanks to everyone for being here.
Yeah.
Great night.